I'm a 19-year-old female. I have had this friend, 19 male, who I've known for many years, but was never close to. Recently, coming back from uni for summer, I went back home to stay with my parents. There isn't much to do in my hometown except for hang out with friends, smoke, and drink. So that's exactly what I did. While hanging out with my friends, I ran into the guy. I'll call him Saf for the purpose of the story. Saf has always seemed like a chill guy. Typical 19-year-old man who studies business, living off of daddy's money since he comes from a wealthy family. As soon as we reconnected, we developed a closer friendship. He started hosting at his house and my friends and I would go. When we smoke, he frequently brought up his fantasies of killing and eating someone. Of course, all of us being high would just laugh it off and consider it to be shock humor. However, he would never laugh while making these jokes. We all agreed that it was pretty creepy, but we chalked it up to him being really high. That is until I started hanging out with him alone. We have a pretty small friend group that hangs out nearly every day. Saf and I would stay up pretty late after everyone's left, usually until the sun comes up, which is how we got so close because it would just be us at the end of the night and he would drive me home. On one of those nights, we were with a group of friends and decided that we would take edibles. For context, we were at Saf's house. 3 hours into it, when we were all pretty gone, Saf starts going on a tangent about how it would feel to pluck someone's eyeballs out. He starts going into detail, and my other friend asked him to stop talking about it because it was making him uncomfortable. He always did this, but this time, he really went into detail, explaining imagery, etc. Someone quickly changed the subject, and the night went on. About an hour later, my friends and I decided to take a look in the fridge for munchies. As we look in the fridge for shit to eat, I feel someone put their arm around my neck, and I feel something quite heavy putting pressure on it, and I look down. I realize Saf is holding a knife to my neck and holding my other friend with his other free hand. "What are you guys doing?" he asked. Keep in mind, we are all very high, so I start laughing it off and going along with what I thought was a joke. As my friend and I answer him, I realize he still hasn't pulled the knife away from my neck, and that he, in fact, is holding it closer, to the point where I started to cough. Thankfully, the knife was quite dull, but it was still a massive kitchen knife. As soon as I realized he isn't letting go, I let out a scream, nothing too loud or alarming. I was hoping he would also assume I was joking. He then lets go and walks away. The night goes on and we quickly forget about what happened. Saf offers to drive my friend and I home at the end of the night when everyone's left. My friend and I don't have a car or money, so we accept. On the drive home, stopped at a red light. He made my friend get out and check if the car was damaged because he had seen something bump it while driving. Neither my friend or I saw this, but my friend got out of the car anyway and checks, and as he tries to open the door to get back in, Saf locks it. The light has now turned green and thank God it's only 5 a.m. because there were only 2 or 3 other cars around, but they all started beeping and swerving as to not hit the car or my friend. My friend and I are yelling at him to open the door. He drives a couple inches forward, putting the tires on my friend's foot. He then unlocks the door and watches my friend yell at him for being trapped under the tire. I look over to Saf and I see him hysterically laughing and putting the car in reverse for my friend to get in. Once we get back on the road, he starts driving crazy, which isn't unusual for him, but he was a lot more reckless that morning. Now, before you all judge me for staying friends with such a weird and dangerous man, keep in mind it had never happened this bad before. He just said really weird shit every now and then, but honestly thought it was more of an intrusive thought thing. I struggle with mental health and have the most vile and weird intrusive thoughts, so I thought that's what it was, and as for the night I have mentioned, we're really high on edibles. So although I was very weirded out, I thought he must have been super high, and so was I, so I convinced myself I was overreacting. Then one night we go to a party together. We get back into the car for the after party, but on the way, I realize that it's been canceled. Saf then asked me if I want to go back to his house, eat something, watch a movie and smoke. It was still early in the night, so I agreed, knowing that I wouldn't be asleep for a while. We pull up, he tells me to make myself comfortable, and he's gonna cook us some pasta. So I sit down, turn on the movie and wait. He comes back out with the pasta, and I eat almost all of it. In a few minutes into the movie, I started to feel very ill. I mentioned this to Saf, and he says it's probably because I drank, but I only drank very little at the party, which was around 3 hours ago at this point. I haven't thrown up or felt nauseous from alcohol in years. As the time goes on, I keep feeling worse and practically beg him to take me home. He refuses because he is in his house. This is the first time he's declined taking me home. At this point, I had a really bad feeling, along with a sickness, and my body decided I have to get out of there. I thankfully had some money with me, so I ordered a cab and went home. On the way home in the cab, I started vomiting out of the window because of how much pain my stomach was in. I get home and I collapse, but I'm unable to fall asleep because of the pain I'm in. Then I start thinking about all the times he mentioned the desire to kill someone and eat them. He's always talked about how he would eat the girl's thigh because he believes it would be the juiciest. How he would only eat a girl and not a boy. Since this day I've kept my distance, but I've been fighting myself internally asking, did I just get poisoned? Or did I just drink too much? Is he a psychopath? Or just a little weird? I truly don't know, so any advice is appreciated. As I've mentioned, I've been friends with him for years and developed a close relationship. I do love him as a friend, just not enough to be eaten. I have this friend, I'll just use the first letter, R, who I believe has been stalking me for the past 2 weeks, if not longer. I'll give some background info, then get into the problem I'm in. We went back in 2014, in high school. He was always quiet, but a nice and easygoing guy. We grew very close, and I saw him as a brother. We didn't have a smooth childhood. He saw his parents argue a lot, often for years. His mom even cheated on his dad, and he saw the effect it had on him and the whole family. But you wouldn't suspect anything out of the ordinary just meeting him at first. Around 2016, he started to become a little bit paranoid and would seem a bit pessimistic at first. He never had many friends, neither did I for that matter. We had 2 other friends together that we saw often, and they were the only ones he trusted. I saw him have a very strange panic attack where he ran out of the restaurant that we were at, and he ran to a nearby park and yelled at people. I called his dad to come get him, and he got into the car and gave him a pill. Apparently, this had been the second time this had happened to him, recently. Fast forward to June 2021. In between the last episode attack to now, R seemed normal as could be, but I noticed he was a bit off and has been since then. He met a girl in college months before that he says he fell madly deeply in love with, but she rejected him when he asked her out on a date and blocked him on everything right after graduation. It took a massive toll on his emotional and mental state. He had another episode where he ran outside of his house and actually provoked someone, and they punched him in his face in self-defense. His parents took him to the hospital during that summer, and he was officially diagnosed with schizophrenia. So from late 2021 until now, I've noticed he's quieter, still cracks jokes, and can have a decent conversation with him, and still seems like he's a nice guy. But there's some stuff recently that I truly think is alarming, and that's why I'm making this post. So I'll cut to the chase. For the last 6 weeks, we've hung out 3 times. This was actually after a hiatus where we didn't see each other since February this year because I started working more hours and went to the night shift. Each of those hangouts, I noticed that he looks at me in a really strange way, like he's horny and imagining me naked, or imagining himself hurting me. We're both male, heterosexual, saying this to preface for what I'm going to mention in a bit. He also mentions how he's still in love with a girl from school, but proceeds to call her a slut, whore, and wants to rape and kill her right after. He has said this numerous times and even mentions going to the elementary school that she works at. He sent me a picture of the school on Google Maps with an arrow pointed at it and firework emojis last week. He has admitted that he has parked outside of her home and sitting there for hours, about 5 times back in 2021. For the past week, he has been insisting on hanging out several times a day, and when I was at Chili's with my parents on Saturday, he sent me a message saying, "Chili's." He was able to see me since I'm on SnapMap on Snapchat, since I use the app often to talk to other friends. When I went to the mall right after, he said, "You're going to the mall again? You were there yesterday." Which is true. I went to the mall once with my mom, and then with both my parents the day later to get some stuff since one of our favorite stores is closing, and we wanted to check out the good deals. On the drive home that day, he messaged me saying, "You didn't work today? We should have hung out." I replied, "Maybe Wednesday." So the day after, on Sunday, he again insisted on seeing me, but I went to go play soccer instead with my other friends, and then went to do laundry afterwards. When I was at the laundromat, he sent me a soccer ball emoji, and then a laundry emoji, indicating he saw me on SnapMap. Here's the thing, he keeps mentioning where I am, and it's always within 10 minutes of me being on my phone. He's actually done this for the last 2 years, but never this frequently. It used to be twice a month, and I brushed it off, but now I'm noticing something actually concerning. He's also been calling me boyfriend, and sending me heart emojis the past week. When I told him I might see him this week, which I won't, but I said that I would, just to make him not mad, because I'm actually fearful of him hurting me, or others. He said, "You think I can wait that long to see my boyfriend?" This past Sunday, I didn't reply to him for 4 hours, and he kept asking me if I was mad, and then said he wants me to reply no longer than a minute after he texts me each time. I have a feeling he's constantly on his phone looking for when I'm active on social media, and I really don't know why. He also admitted to me a month ago that he makes fake profiles to be able to gain access to the other girl's Instagram and look at her pictures, and he says he masturbates to them. He even uses a nudity app to take her clothes off, he said. All of this is concerning. He currently doesn't have a job and hasn't had one for the last 2 years. I'm the only friend he talks to or sees, and I feel he's developed a compulsion or fixation or dependence or a mix of all three on me. As I mentioned, he said he wants to rape and kill the girl that used to be in the class, and he knows where she lives and he knows where she works. I have not mentioned my thoughts on this to him, again, out of fear. He currently takes medicine daily, and he said that he's been seeing a new therapist for just a month now, but I don't know if any of those things are even working. I'm asking for advice on how to approach this and what to do. My concern is if I tell anyone, like the police or the girl, he will retaliate by hurting me or my family, as he knows where I live. Any help is appreciated. Okay, so essentially he asked me why I'm not on SnapMap anymore, and I got a bit ticked off and confronted him in a nice and civil way. And he pretty much said all that stuff were jokes and that he doesn't want to harm anyone. But I don't buy it. I feel like he's in denial. Any help? These events happened over several months in 2016 when me and my sister, then 16 and 14, first moved into our recent apartment complex with our mother. Admittedly, we were still into the hoverboard craze then and would ride them around. This is how we met Savannah. She was our age and lived in our building. She asked to hang out, and we were happy to hopefully make a new friend, so we said yes. We hung out outside of the complex in a little park area. It got dark, and we started making up ghost stories. Turns out, she likes creepy paranormal stuff, like we did. As we were walking home, the light in one of the apartment hallways flickered, and I jolted and said, "It's a spirit trying to communicate with us." Savannah made up a flash once for yes, twice for no system to communicate with the spirit, and we messed around a bit. We thought it was all harmless fun. The next day, she runs over to us, excited. She informs us the spirit we had met last night told her its name was Corinne, and that it meant light, so it all made perfect sense now. We asked her how she knew, and she said she went back later that night, alone, to talk to it. This is the first time it occurred to us that she might have really believed in this stuff. Our aunt had given us an old Ouija board as a joke the year before, and we thought Savannah might like it. Savannah lit up and said she wanted to talk to Corinne, so we huddled in the hallway, connecting the apartments, and put our two hands on the board. We kept getting some random letters that didn't make sense, but soon Savannah's questions were more directed to her. We felt her moving it and called her out. She got mad and said that she'll prove it. She took her hand off of it, and it no longer moved. She huffed and insisted it wasn't her. Over the next few weeks, we did mostly normal stuff with her. She kept talking about the ghost and the Ouija boards until we broke down and played again. This time, we were introduced to a new ghost, Evan. We knew that Savannah was moving the planchette, but were curious about the story she was making up, so we let her follow through. Evan was a ghost, or a demon rather, about our age, who wanted free from a greater demon controlling him. The greater demon's name? Corinne. Savannah's parents called her inside, and conveniently, Evan had to go too. He told us to protect ourselves against Corinne, especially Savannah. Savannah said how cute that was for him to offer. A few days go by normally, but then Savannah's back to tell us that she has a boyfriend. We are happy for her until she tells us his name is Evan. We're wondering what the hell she's talking about, and she explains that, while sleeping over at another friend's house, something had tugged off her shorts while sleeping. She woke up and heard Evan's voice. Then he visited her in her dreams and asked her on a date, or something like that. She said yes. Of course, we knew she made up Evan, so we were kinda like, what is wrong with you? And we don't talk about the demon stuff anymore. Now, Savannah is extremely possessive over her friends. When she would see us with someone else, she'd text us nonstop about why we hadn't invited her. We tried to keep our distance, but she lived on the same ground floor and literally watched out our window waiting for us to come outside. She latched onto us. We didn't know much about her home life, but she always seemed troubled. She had scars on her wrist and talked about running away from home. Her parents seemed alright, if rather strict and religious. We still hung out with her because we were worried, but we're starting to feel weird about it. Worst, she randomly showed up holding her hands out, saying Evan is holding her hand. She looked at random things and would laugh when no one was talking because Evan had told her a joke. One time, she managed to feel her cheek where it was supposedly warm from Evan's kiss. It was not warm. One day, my sister and I were bored from her talking to Evan on the Ouija board. She was still controlling the whole thing and wanted some fun. I texted my mom to call from a private number and play some creepy sounds. Looking back, this was one of the dumbest things I did, but at the time, it was just for fun. My mom made the call and I put it on speaker. Savannah is living for it, especially when my mom played the track from a scary movie about a ghost. My mom took it a step further and threw a banana off the third-story balcony for us to see. Savannah said it was a sign that Corinne was winning. We had no idea of the fire this would light in her. We were all about to tell her that it was a prank, but again, her mom called her inside. She found us the next day and I came clean about the prank. She laughed and said there was no way that we could have done all that. I said, no, my mom literally did all that. When Savannah had told her friend about it, who told her that yellow objects were a sign of the devil, and seeing them meant the devil was haunting you. This was all she talked about for a while, but since nothing else happened, she gradually forgot. Things went back to normal for a while, until Autumn moved in. Autumn and Savannah connected instantly because of their history with depression. Autumn was a few years younger than us, but had hell of a lot more of a past. This included a significant time spent in psychiatric facilities and violence towards her classmates and family. Autumn claimed that she heard demons talk to her at night, and just like that, the ghost stuff started again. Savannah felt threatened by Autumn and felt the need to one-up her with ghost stuff. She told her that Evan was her ghost brother that looked out for her. I was like, hold on, you claimed that he was your boyfriend. Savannah giggled and said, that's gross, he's my brother. Her story had completely switched. Now she was dating another demon named Jacob, and they were engaged. She even showed us the ring to prove it. The next week or so was literally a match between them to see who was the darkest and most involved in the spirit world, or whatever. They compared scars on their wrist and bragged about cutting themselves and doing little things like sneaking out at night. In a move to one-up Autumn, Savannah drew a giant pentagram in the parking lot with chalk. Her parents found out, and she backed out and blamed it on Autumn. The next day, people came and repaved the parking lot. The pentagram is now buried under there forever, literally. Savannah moved on to saying that her friend had found Jacob's body and was going to put his spirit back inside it. Savannah continued to take advice from this friend who fueled everything she did. Savannah now said the friend was teaching her witchcraft. We mostly avoided her at this point, but she'd asked us to do things like make holy water with her and try to summon her a familiar. From that point on, she insisted that she was a fire witch, and walking around wearing all black with Halloween makeup on her face. She and Autumn frequently snuck out together, and occasionally we see the cop cars at our house. My sister and I were avoiding them both, but now we get fiery texts from both of them if we hung out with other people, especially our guy friends. Once, they saw us get home and stood in the parking lot pretending to be possessed. Autumn also cut off all her hair and claimed that she tried to kill our teacher. My sister and I knew it was bullshit, or at least we hoped, but Savannah took it seriously. She'd go around telling her neighbors the terrible crimes she committed or wanted to commit. She even told us when she first saw us outside on our hoverboards, she wished for them to blow up. One day, we again saw the police come to her door, and the officers had jackets that said that they were from the Juvenile Justice Department. Her mom pulled me, my sister, and our mom to explain what was going on. Apparently, 2 years before, they discovered Savannah talking with this man online. Her messages to him were hiring him to come kill her parents after making threats of killing them a few days before. We were able to confirm the story after pet sitting for them and finding the court papers about it. We had known that she was always on probation, but she'd always tell us different stories as to why. Savannah continued to beg us to hang out with her after that, even inviting herself to spend the night. We avoided her at all costs, but she'd follow us everywhere. It kinda died down when Autumn moved out, and Savannah moved with her family shortly after. Since then, she started doing service hours at a horse stable and graduated from high school. I really hope she's gotten happier and more stable. Autumn messaged my sister a few months ago, asking to call her mom to confirm she was with us. She wasn't, and we later saw her with a 19-year-old dude. She's 14. My mom, sister, and I have moved as well. There are too many incidents in those apartments. Our new place is so quiet and peaceful. But to Savannah and Autumn, let's not meet again. I've been sitting alone at home all day due to a storm, and I think I finally feel ready to speak about my experience with a girl I met in college. No one has ever heard the full story, and I'm ready to tell most of it here. I'm a 23-year-old female, but at the time I was 19, going on 20 at the time of meeting this girl. I was also in an unstable and codependent relationship at the time, and was utterly depressed, naive, and craving a sense of validation of my thoughts and feelings that no one around me at the time was willing to give me, so I was the perfect candidate to inflate and dote upon the literal god complex ego of this one girl. To begin, I was in an acting 101 class my first semester of college, and swore to myself that I wouldn't make friends in the 2 years I was set to be there. This was a community college. I was to go in, get good grades, and leave. It wasn't until the third day, a week and a half since the semester started, and this girl walks in, and you could feel the air in the room grow thin. Her presence was both alluring and yet annoying at the same time. Charisma seemed to ooze out of her pores and shine like a halo from her hair. For more context, I am from the US, and when this girl began to speak with a British accent, everyone was confused yet intrigued. Apparently, she had just gotten back from a trip to England with her father. Apparently, she was originally from there. That was when my first instinct rang clear. If she had enough money to be flying to and from England, why is she doing an acting 101 class at a community college? I decided to keep my curiosity to myself until the next class when she asked me questions that I unfortunately no longer remember. However, I do remember my initial disgust with her demeanor. She seemed too bubbly, too poised. Something was just off. After that brief encounter, I felt that was all I'd ever hear from her. However, slowly, she would make remarks to me during class, and eventually, I started striking conversations as well. Then one day, after class, she mentions to me how expensive and annoying it was to wait for an Uber every time class ends. I remember offering her a ride as an alternative, but she would dramatically decline, saying things like how her parents would get angry with her for burdening me with the task of driving her around. I understood and felt pity for her after that. In that moment, I thought that she was in a household where her parents were overbearing and slightly abusive, so I decided I would try to befriend her outside of class. She seemed nice enough. I also had this pain in my heart to help her for some reason, and that was exactly what she wanted. So over time, we grew closer. I would offer her rides home. I would insist and say that I'm her friend now, and that friends help each other out. She seemed to enjoy these gestures. She'd compliment me, and then go on to say how tough her life was without a license. Eventually, she agreed, and I took her home. It was honestly very nice to have someone to talk about class with outside of class. Soon enough, after driving her home for the past few classes, she invited me in for tea. I thought it was adorable, having afternoon tea and gossiping with a friend. She was British after all. We both eventually opened up about ourselves and spoke on things besides class. She told me she was my age. She graduated the same year as me and also took a gap year. She said throughout school she traveled to and from England, and I found it so fascinating. She was adopted from a third world country and brought to England, and then moved to her current town when she was 6. She told me about past relationships. I opened up about mine. She always seemed to be the same as me, like she was trying to emulate me in some way. It was so subtle, it was difficult to notice at first. I told her about the apprehension I felt in my current relationship. She sympathized and told me a story about how her ex hurt her, even worse. I would always take note of things she said, because I was not only her friend, but we seemed to share the same experiences. However, hers were always more severe than mine. In hindsight, I know why that is, but at the time, I just thought how unlucky this girl was, and I felt so bad for her past. Soon it became a tradition to drink tea at her house after class, but I had to be out before Mom got home, and if I were there to meet her mother, it would be bad. One day, her mom got home early and was surprised, yet delighted to see me. She introduced herself and I did the same, all while my friend sat and sulked in anger. Her mother seemed delightful, and I was surprised by how welcoming she was. She offered me food and gave me some crackers to take home. I eventually confronted my friend, asking why she would pay her mom to be that way. She said she was just kinder to guests than her. I was confused, but I fully understood. I have a mother who's very similar to that, so I shook it off. One day in class, we get our midterm assignment. We were to prepare a nonverbal monologue in front of the class. We each got our assigned stage directions and are asked to prepare it in 2 weeks. One of the stage directions was a girl comes home crying after being sexually assaulted. Another girl in our class received this one, but was uncomfortable doing it, and rightfully so. A boy in the class criticized her for not wanting to do it, and she ran out of the classroom. My friend and I followed her. The 3 of us opened up about our past assaults, and we eventually calmed the classmate down. Time passes after the class, and a few classes later, when I was walking my friend in my car, she all of a sudden runs away from me. I follow her, and I'm laughing at her. She had fallen gracefully on the ground and was on the grass on her knees. I asked her what she was doing. I asked her why she was being a weirdo. What she did was related to our conversation. She looks up at me with some strange kind of fear in her eyes and says that she just saw her assault her just then on campus. I was shaken at this point because I don't remember seeing anyone walk anywhere near us. She said he walked by and stared at her evilly. I was confused and said she must have imagined it, but she was adamant. I was also even more confused because she had told me she had filed a restraining order against him. How could he be allowed on campus? If he really wanted to go to the same school, there were 2 campuses in 2 different towns, so surely he could have gone to the other campus. I was asked all these questions and was met with little answer. Obviously, she said she wanted to talk to her mother and handle it accordingly. It took 2 weeks to hear anything about it. I wanted her to bring it up, but she never did. So eventually I asked her, and she gave me a story about how she went to the dean's office after class and fixed things. I remember being confused because I had driven her home after all our classes were over. She said that they went after I left, but that couldn't have been because the school offices closed around 5, and we would always leave at 5. Many of my questions were met with strange excuses, but I remember just letting it go. This was a sore subject after all, and I didn't want to upset her any more than she already was. Weeks passed and my friend and I eventually became inseparable. We seemed to know a lot of the ins and outs of each other. We even hosted a Friendsgiving together at her house with some of the people from our acting class. Then the end of the summer semester came, and I could feel a rift grow between us. I was confused and hurting. She said she wasn't going for a degree and was just there to take acting classes. I remember being confused. I thought she was a theater major like me. She had said she was, but I guess she might have changed her mind. She said she would be auditioning for the London Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York City early the next year, and she was probably going to get it and would never see me again. I remember feeling confused. Why didn't she tell me this sooner? Why did she even get close to me during the semester? Then I thought how it was probably my fault that I pushed her to be my friend. But I just felt so bad for her. It was like she was asking for a friend without telling me. Eventually, I convinced her that it would be good for her to go to class with me again next semester. Partly because I wanted to selfishly keep her close, and the other part because I knew, from what she told me, that if she never got into the academy, she would probably end her life. I feared for my friend so much, I wanted to push her to be in class with me, because she had somehow made me think that I was helping her not kill herself. So she signed up for class and decided to audition with me for the spring musical, but she wasn't going with me because she auditioned alone and couldn't talk to anyone before she sang, which I guess was understandable. Soon her audition for the academy rolls around, and I managed to come with her and her parents for the weekend. New York City is about an afternoon's train ride away, and her parents were kind enough to pay for my ticket. How I managed to be invited was by her telling me how scared and terrified she was to be with her parents on this trip. So I offered to come, to be a buffer between her and her parents' evil ways. I was met with polite no's, and eventually, just like all my other kind offers, I was then met with a yes. Besides, I love New York City, and when I learned I didn't have to pay, I was even more excited. Now for those of you who have made it this far, I want you to understand if you haven't already, it wasn't like I was begging this girl to let me do anything for her. She'd answered me in a way that made things seem like I had to insist. Like, if I didn't ask anything, she would be hurt, and it would be my fault. Or in simpler words, I was manipulated into doing things for her. But it never felt like that, because I meant it. I was much more generous to friends I had met at the time then. So, I arrived in Grand Central Station, and was met with my friend and her mother. We walked to the hotel and everything seems normal. We go to sleep and I wake up, and to be honest, all I remember about this trip was how scared I was about the new virus going around. It was January 2020. Her parents seemed to be such angels. I remember going to shops with them, and they were talking about how my friend would like this, and how they wanted to make this for my friend, and how we should go here after my friend was out of the audition. All their parents talked about was my friend. I was floored. I remember her telling me to stay in the room all day, to ignore her parents, but I didn't want to. I now see why. Eventually, we made our way to the New York Public Library. I remember going to the top floor, taking pictures of the painted ceiling, standing for a minute, and then her parents find me and say that they have to go meet my friend now. She was in need of some cherry-colored chapstick and some water. They told me to stay, that they would meet me later to explore the city. I said, absolutely not. I was not walking around alone in this massive city, no way. So I went with them. I witnessed their panic as they tried to hurry to her audition and find water and the right chapstick in time. All while my friend was texting them exactly what she wants and tells them to hurry. We walked for about 20 minutes to this building. 20 minutes. My parents won't even come downstairs to tell me something, let alone that far to bring me water and chapstick. They decided that it would take too much time to get the cherry-colored chapstick, and that my friend would just have to get the plain one from her mom's purse. We got to the building and met her in the lobby. She goes to her parents to see that they have no cherry chapstick and not the right water. She's furious. She gets mad and just storms into the audition room, never saying thank you. After that, we just sit in the Panera Bread and wait for another 20 minutes. Eventually, she gets out of her audition and meets us inside. She then was adamant on alienating me from her parents and only wanted to talk to me about her audition. She tells me the story, and I can't help but to think that she's lying about it all. It all just seemed bizarre, but I don't remember the details. I just remember after the story I told her about my date with her parents, and she was very upset with me spending all my time with them. She scolded me and asked what we talked about over and over again for the rest of the trip. We went to sleep and left the next day. I remember feeling very weirded out with my friend after that trip. She seemed to be a lot more abrasive with me afterwards, and adamant on me not speaking with her parents. Eventually, I learned that her name that she had told me wasn't her actual legal name. Eventually, I saw that her high school diploma was from 2019 and not 2018. I asked her about it, and she said that she had got a misprint. The misprint turned in her graduating late because she was in a mental hospital a lot. She went to mental health programs, but also traveled back and forth to England, but also went to school 2 days a week her senior year. She said that she had to do her senior year twice, that she only lived in England when she was a child. She actually lived in England most of her life. Nothing was adding up. All the stories she'd eventually tell never made sense together. I remember half-jokingly asking her to write a timeline of her life because things never added up. Still, despite all the inconsistencies, I still kept her as a friend. The lies were just far enough apart from each other to feel like maybe I was the one that was wrong. The cognitive dissonance was growing in my mind, and this was just the beginning. Now, before I met my friend, I had begun practicing the Wiccan religion. I was a solitary Wiccan who lived by the reed. I was actively practicing altruism as a form of devotion to the Wiccan moon goddess and the horned god. My friend, coincidentally, was also a practicing Wiccan. We had done full moon rituals together, and she seemed to know a lot more than I did, so eventually I followed her lead when it came to rituals. They started out tame, making candle manifestation wishes outside, sitting under the moonlight, meditating together. We'd make our wishes out loud, thus getting to know each other's deepest desires. We were very emotionally vulnerable in these moments together, and after our rituals, we tried all kinds of divination and other spiritual practices. We were like our own little coven. One full moon, just before I had to leave, I asked my friend to do a tarot reading for me on my love life. I had recently had a fight with my then boyfriend, and wanted to see what she saw. My friend seemed to have all the answers about my life when it came to divination, and I was trusting her enough to hear her out. She started pulling cards and read the descriptions. Every single card she pulled was a bad one. It said we would end in failure, hardship, despair, that I had to leave him ASAP. I remember wanting to, but not knowing how. I left that night crying over how horrible that card reading went. To jump back into the timeline, after we started our second semester classes, I remember opening up to some of my classmates that my friend and I were witches. I did it in a way to offer spells for help, but my friend was mad for me outing us. She never wanted them knowing what we did. I was confused. I wanted to help others and invite them into our little world that I love so much, but my friends seemed to see it differently, so I respected her boundary and never brought up us practicing again to others outside of my personal life. Eventually, as I know all you have guessed, the pandemic started in March of 2020. Classes were moved to online, and so was our friendship. We'd FaceTime almost every day and watch movies while on call. Now, at college, the musical had been cast before lockdown, and I unfortunately didn't get in, but my friend did. She met all of the other theater majors and started talking to them in their Discord chat during that pandemic. I was never brought into that circle by her until the summer of 2020, and during that time, and even before lockdown, my friend would try to date the boys in the department, and even grew an obsession with two of them. She told the first one, who I'm actually dating now, that she was friends with his favorite Broadway star and that she would have them meet. He never believed her. After he turned her down, she became angry and started a rumor that he was actually gay. After that, she moved on to another guy who had a girlfriend at the time. She was even more obsessed with him. She enjoyed the chase. The fact that he was her friend and stayed up late and spoke to her all night made her so happy. He had opened up to me and said that she was never the only one he spoke to, and that he was just a night out because of his job, and she was the only one up that late to talk to. During the course of the 2 months during lockdown, and when people began to feel a little more comfortable, my friend and I had talked about her maybe moving into my house. Now, I have a large room in my parents' basement, and my friend had begun to scare me with her talks of her parents are awful to her when she's home with just them. I've yet to mention that she has an older brother with a form of autism, among other issues. She would talk about how mean he was to her. She consistently called me, saying that she was going to kill herself. I was terrified and decided to open up my home to her. This was the worst, but best mistake I've ever made. Worse because of the escalation of our friendship getting worse, but the best because it really made me realize how awful and manipulative she truly was. She moved in, and everything was great. It was nice to be with someone who I considered to be my best friend. It was like a never-ending sleepover. I had a spare bed in my room at the time, and she would use that for a while until she brought over her mattress, and eventually moved all her things in. Everything she had, however, reeked. Everything smelled like BO, and when she lived here, she never showered. She stayed here about 5 days a week and 2 days at her house. She refused to even shower and never changed her clothes. She'd just sit on one side of the room and rot for days, only getting up to use the bathroom and pick up DoorDash. She'd eat on my side of the room and leave her mess for me to pick up. Eventually, I bought a large trash barrel for us to use, and she would fill it up almost daily. I tried to do moon rituals with her, and she would refuse to practice with me. I'd ask for a tarot reading, and she would refuse. However, her prophecies didn't stop, they just got worse. Instead of getting tarot readings, I get dream recalls. She'd tell me all these amazing dreams she had. They were said to be prophetic dreams brought to her by the goddess Aphrodite, whom she claimed to work with and worship while I was outside doing my moon rituals. She'd tell me I'd be a famous actress and I'd date a K-pop star. I'd see the world and be an amazing celebrity. Obviously, I didn't believe her at first, but she'd tell me her stories in such a way that it would give me hope that my hard work would actually pay off. She had the goddess of Aphrodite on her side delivering these messages. I wanted to believe her so bad that I shoved all logic aside and clung on the future reality that she was feeding me. I was no longer in a sad and crumbling relationship. I would be cast in shows. I'd be happy one day, and that's all I truly wanted. Soon, during the summer, my friend would have another friend over. We'd all hang out, but this new girl was more my friend's friend than mine. Eventually, my friend began to actively try to keep us from seeing each other, but it never really worked because eventually me and the other girl became close. We would even work together in my room while my friend sulked in the corner, eyes closed, listening to music and ignoring us every time we invited her to join us. Also around that time. Now, this is not my story to tell, despite being anonymous. I just don't feel comfortable sharing the exact details of the boy's encounter with my friend. But what happened was later told to me by this boy, and it was on a night that I was out at my then boyfriend's house. This incident happened in my bedroom, however, and the details still haunt me to this day. Though rest assured, nothing too horrible escalated, but if it wasn't for some sort of intervening that I can't remember the details of, I don't know what my friend would have truly done to him. I remember after that night, despite not knowing what had happened, my friend grew even more malicious towards me. She began to sow the seeds of fear of the Greek gods into me, saying that they were angry with me and that's why I was having bad days. That's why my boyfriend and I were always fighting. I was doing things wrong, and it was driving me wild that I didn't know what it was exactly. All I knew was something was upsetting the powers above me by just existing, and that was why my life was currently a mess. So one night, one desperate and hollow night, I asked my friend again about my future and what I was doing wrong. She looked at me and said, "Do you want it for me or Aphrodite?" I looked at her and said, "Aphrodite." My friend enters a meditative state and then looks to me in an evil, sadistic way. Her demeanor had changed entirely. I have never seen, and I have yet to see, anything quite like it. I was told that the reason I was having such horrible days was because I had to break up with my boyfriend. I had to do it soon or nothing else in my life would ever become true. No fame, no success, no happiness. If I didn't do it by the next full moon, that my life would be stagnant, that I would amount to nothing. It was so convincing. I could still feel the primal fear I felt right then and there. My friend took the bracelet that I had been wearing, that was from my boyfriend, and held it. She told me, still through the persona of Aphrodite, that I was being held down by this bracelet, that in order to rid myself of my boyfriend once and for all, I had to get rid of it, soon. I was tasked to toss it in the lake an hour away from me, and to do it only with my friend. But I had to break up with my boyfriend first, before ridding myself from the cursed bracelet. I was stunned. I didn't know what to feel. My friend left the so-called trance, not recalling a thing. I told her about the encounter, how scared I was, the fear of being smited, of disobeying an ancient deity. She told me that I never had to do it. I think it was because she was scared of what she had done to me. Maybe she thought she went too far. Or maybe it was just all a part of an act to get me to do what she wanted. I'm not entirely sure, but I was adamant on leaving my then boyfriend. I had worked up the courage and did it a few days later, but everything still fell off. A few days after that, we drove with another friend of mine up to the lake. I invited that friend because I was scared to just go with my manipulative friend, and I remember her being angry with me for inviting this other girl, but I didn't care. I knew something was off and I needed there to be more people, and I'm so glad I did because I'm not sure what would have happened to me. We were entirely off the grid when we got there. The GPS stopped working 15 minutes before arriving at the lake, and we got lost trying to leave. It was truly a surreal experience. Never felt fully safe the entire trip, and my evil friend was all too calm. After that, my friend moved out of the house. I remember we got into a fight. It was a night that she got mad at me for missing my ex. She had wanted me to cuddle her, and I wasn't comfortable with it. So she went to her side of the room and sulked, waiting for me to beg her to come back, but I never did. We just went to sleep. The next day I went to go speak to my ex about our breakup, finalize things, give things back. I came home and my friend was pretending to sleep. She was laying in the dark, smiling. I told her to cut the shit and talk to me. I explained where I was, and she said she knew, that my mom told her, which was actually true. We talked about how she's not getting better. She was cutting herself, she wasn't eating, and she was laying around all day. She made excuses when I tried to help her change her habits. I was worried, but every time I voiced concern, I was met with excuses and blame for being concerned. So a few days later, she called me and told me that she'll never change, and that I had to live with her the way she was. At the time, she adopted having a diagnosis with antisocial personality disorder, and claimed to have always had it. I didn't believe her because she only started saying this after she had watched a Netflix K-drama with a woman with the same diagnosis. I finally started to piece together all the lies she told me. I also found out a little before our fight that she was actually a year younger than me after I saw her ID. She explained that the reason that was because her parents changed her birth date after she was adopted because they wanted a younger baby. She accused her parents of committing forgery. I wanted to take action, but she never did because it was a lie. Her chosen name was also a lie. She told me many stories for the reason why she wanted a different name after I found out her given name. Her accent was fake. She had never lived in England. I believe she had made up that trip she went on right before classes. I finally saw that everything was a lie. When she moved out, she left all her things at my house, so my sister and I packed up her stuff and brought it to her house. She told me that she wasn't home and couldn't help us, that she had to get adult diapers for her dying grandma, who was always dying. She also said that I wasn't allowed to bring her things inside and to leave them in the mudroom. After we packed up everything into her mudroom, my friend walks out from her backyard dressed in the finest outfit I'd yet to see her in, and gets into the car with a boy that she was obsessed with, completely ignoring me and my sister. She never even said thank you. I was furious. I housed this girl. I cooked her meals if she ever ate. I listened to her. I did everything in my power to care for her. All I got was a mess of fuck you and my life in shambles. I tried confronting her on her lie and was met with countless, insistent, and self-deprecative excuses. So I just gave up and never spoke to her again. She blocked me on everything after that. I never spoke to anyone from my college ever again. She's gone from social media as well. All of her accounts have been changed or deactivated. To conclude, I eventually got back together with my boyfriend and recently broke up with him on my own terms. I just wasn't ready to let go at the time. I still practice witchcraft, just not Wicca, and I'm much more educated now than I was 3 years ago. Like I said, I have a new boyfriend, and I'm also best friends with the other girl, who my evil friend introduced me to. I have my associate's degree in theater arts, and I've done a lot of work in 1 year for my local theater community. I plan to move to New York City in the summer. My life is amazing now, and I have that friend, among others, out of my life. I still at times blame myself for being so naive and so trusting. I blame myself for the hurt I caused and how everything happened. I'm much more guarded now, but also a lot more headstrong. I also haven't made any new friends since, but I'm currently okay with that. There are many more lies that she had told me that I eventually figured out were lies, but that's too much to write, and honestly I don't remember the timeline too clearly at some parts, but I wrote on here what I know was right. But anyways, thank you for listening to this. And to my old friend, I hope I never see you again, as long as I live.